Hello, I'm Matt Cawthon, and I'm a retired Texas Ranger. And today I'll be your host for this episode of the Cinco Peso podcast, the official podcast of the Texas Ranger Association Foundation. Join us each week on the Cinco Peso podcast to learn more about the Texas Rangers, past and present. Today we have a very special guest and a close friend of mine, retired Chief Tony Leal of the Texas Rangers. Before we get started, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment on this video so we can share the Cinco Peso podcast with a wider audience. Now let's get right into it today. We have a special guest, Tony Leal, retired chief of the Texas Ranger and a good friend of mine. Tony, how long have we been friends?
Over 30 years, Matt.
It has been over 30 years. We've gone down a lot of dusty trails together.
We've looked a lot better than we do today.
And we looked a lot better, didn't we?
No, we've known each other, I think, from our days, starting out when we wanted to be Rangers down in Company D. Kind of got fathered by Jack Dean like you did, and
Yes.
Went into that. It was a great time to go into the Rangers at that time. We got to work with some of those Rangers that are, they're gone now. But Al Cuellar, who you and I,
Yes.
he mentored us, and
He
was
sure
just
did.
like, I hold him in the highest of men, not just Rangers, but of men that I've known. Rudy Rodriguez, Ray Martinez, and Bob Steele. So Bob Steele was still there. People who don't know Bob Steele, I don't know of any others, but he was a New York City policeman who had been involved back in the 70s, 60s, 70s, organized crime up there in New York, and couldn't stay there after the people that they put in jail, and came in to DPS as a narcotics agent and then made Ranger. So it was just one of those offices where, like all the offices, you had Johnny Clevehagen in Houston, and so, but that was my intro into the Rangers. With those were the active Rangers when I got there as a highway patrol sergeant.
Isn't that amazing? I'd kind of forgotten about Bob Steele. He had that New York brogue accent, and it sure looked kind of funny coming out of a guy wearing boots and a cowboy hat.
And a double rig.
And a double rig, yeah.
When he was coming up to you, with a double rig, and explain what a double rig is, but when he'd open his mouth, he sounded like if you were watching NYPD Blue.
That's right.
But he didn't look it.
No, didn't look it. And what a great name, Bob Steele.
Bob Steele.
He was a character for sure. And you mentioned a double rig. What the chief is referring to there is it's a holster on a gun belt that you wear below your trouser belt. Yep. So it's two belts.
Two belts, a double rig.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I used to tell folks that one holds up my gun and one holds up my pants.
That's it. In ours, you had your extra ammunition on. You had your pistol with a holster on it. I got one I'd like to show you later. Hey,
let's do it right now. I'm kind of excited about that because I think I know where it came from.
Okay, I'll do that.
Maybe. I think our listeners
you can bring both of them, Jody. Thank you.
I think we're in for a real treat here. These are some weapons that were carried by the chief on his duties as a Texas Ranger.
So this was my holster on my rig. I think you've got one almost identical.
I've got one identical.
To this.
Yeah.
It's got just what we call a thumb strap on it.
Yeah.
You just flip it off with your thumb when you're going to go for this pistol. And this particular holster, and I think yours was too, and my whole rig and everything I carried was made by David Hullen.
Who is who?
Who is a sheriff now in North Central Texas. I don't forget.
Eastland.
In Eastland, right?
Yeah.
Eden?
Eastland.
Okay. But he was a Ranger after us. But before he made Ranger, his side gig was making leather.
Yes.
And I'm telling you, I've looked at leather at the El Paso Saddlery or from TDCJ, and nobody, this leather holster with this tooling, and if you can't see it, that's real tooling,
Yes.
And This is over 30 years old.
Yep.
It's from when about 30 years old. And the pistol that's in it, I'd like to show that to you. This is an engraved, fully engraved hand 45. It's a 1911 Colt Commander. And it's got ivory grips. Could get them then when it was legal back then. And a gold Ranger badge in the center. But this pistol was given to me by my father, who got it when he got out of the Marine Corps. And it was his carry pistol. And when I made highway patrolman, I was too young to buy a pistol. So I had my issued .357 Magnum, and I needed a pistol. And so I had asked my father, hey, would you go to Carter Country with me? I need to buy a pistol, And he gave me this 45 at that time. So this goes back to when I started with DPS in 1984. But after I made Ranger, I had it engraved and made into a barbecue gun and carried it. So this was my carry gun for most of my career. I carried it. I carried a Colt Python at times because I wanted to be just like Al Cuellar. I still have that Colt Python.
Don't we all?
And I had a couple other 1911s, but this one means a lot to me because my dad carried it, and it was the gun I was wearing the day they pinned my Ranger badge on me.
You wouldn't take for that gun, would you?
No,
Nothing
there's
in the
not enough.
world.
That gun will go to my kids hopefully, and then their kids, and it'll stay that way.
Well, that's
and
just
I've had other guns that you have that sold them, bought them, and carried and sold. They didn't mean that much to me. They were good guns, but this one, and I've got another one that means a lot to me.
Let's talk about that.
This is a small Model 36. So once I wasn't a real policeman anymore, and got put in the headquarters office in Austin as chief, you don't really need a gun anymore because you're not putting anybody in jail, and the chances of you running anybody bad are are not good. But this
I'm
is
glad you said it, so I didn't have to.
Yeah, exactly. This old Model 36 it was brand new in a box, originally made back in the 1960s, I think. The hammer had been taken off it, so it's really good, easy to wear in your pants with no holster. That's the way I always wore it, with ivory grips on it. Again, back when they were legal. And when I made chief, a good friend of mine named Herman Minsky, you probably remember Herman, but Herman was the official and had a certificate on his wall, from the department saying he was the official armorer of the Texas Rangers,
Amazing.
And that was an old tradition. They had always had quartermasters, armorers back in time, right? But he would work on all the guns and make guns for Rangers, special guns. So he tweaked this out. The trigger pull on this is very light. It's made to carry concealed in your waistband. And Herman gifted me this when I made chief. So that's the second gun that means a lot to me. And
It's just amazing.
Unless I was in the field, unless we were down on the border or something after I made chief, I'd go back to my 1911. But day to day, in the office, at headquarters, like I tell people, you didn't have to worry about getting shot at headquarters. It'd be a knife in the back you'd get at headquarters. You didn't need...
It sounds like a government agency.
Exactly.
Well, that's amazing. Thanks for sharing that with us, Tony. It's I always love seeing the guns that the guys have carried and just hear the stories behind them.
There's a story behind them.
And guns have value, but the stories are invaluable,
right,
in my opinion. But that's just amazing. I appreciate it. One of the things we want to talk about today is the Crisis Negotiation Unit. And as I understand, of course, it came along after I had retired. You were still working, I think, and it was kind of something that you came up with.
Yeah, well, we started, you were still around
when
we started doing all that. So, throughout the history of the department, started in 1935, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure y'all gone over that, or we'll go over that in future podcasts. But the department was made by a reorganization, right? So at the time there was the Texas Highway Patrol that worked under the Highway Patrol or the Highway Division,
Sure.
And you had the Texas Rangers who worked under the Adjutant General,
Right.
And that had been customary. That had been the way it was. So, but when they created the Texas Department of Public Safety in 1935 and made Chief Carmichael of Highway Patrol into the first director, his title also carried the colonel was also, he was the chief of the colonel of the Highway Patrol and the chief of the Rangers. So up until even the 1950s, the director was the chief of the Rangers. So when they made the Texas Department of Public Safety in 35, just prior to World War II, right? So a lot of guys that were actively serving as highway patrolmen and actively serving as Rangers, they went overseas during World War II. That happened again during Vietnam. I have friends people you and I worked for that were highway patrolmen and went to Vietnam after they'd already been highway patrolmen for a year, but because of the draft, they went and served, and then they got their job back. I don't know if you remember, there's no need for it now. I think it's still policy, though, that if you leave for service, you get your job back when you come back. So those guys came back from World War II, and when they did, and they created the department, a lot of stuff was needed that didn't exist. And I didn't know this until 20-something years into my career, and started, when you're young, it was more about being a ranger, right? And once you're there, and especially once you're there for a while, it becomes more important to you about what the Rangers are and who they are and why we are who we are. I used to tell people that were senior guys like you or me that when you look for a Ranger, you're looking for a guy or woman that's already a Ranger. We're not going to make them a Ranger. They were born that way, and we have to identify them, and say, hey, that kid in motor vehicle theft or special crimes or intelligence or in the highway patrol, that's a Ranger. He just needs the Ranger badge. And I've always said, giving that badge is like when you give your daughter up for marriage. It's that kind of decision, because there's no going back. You can't take the badge away from them, and you can't take her away from them. So I always try to, when we look for people, to look at it that way, right? And so I say all that to say that I learned in my years in the Rangers, and kind of wrote about it when we did the 75th anniversary of the department. I was the chief during that time, and did some research on the Rangers and the department, and got to hear a lot of stuff. And I don't know if you know this, you may know this from back then, but every major division other than the Highway Patrol that exists within DPS was established by the Texas Rangers, and it was established using a Ranger captain. So when we started, hey, we need an intelligence unit during the 40s, because we're at World War and there's German spies coming through Mexico, or Japanese, there was intel at the ports in Houston. A lot of people don't, there's sunken subs off the coast of Texas, that belong to Germans. So the country was on high alert for that. So they said, okay, well, we need an intelligence unit, So the first intelligence unit, the director put Ranger Captain Manuel Gonzalez in charge, and said, okay, so he's the first commander of intelligence. And I may be using the wrong title. He may have kept his captain's title, but he was the first commander of intelligence.
And who do we know Gonzalez by a more popular name?
Lone Wolf.
Lone Wolf Gonzalez.
So very famous Ranger, very flamboyant guy, but did a lot of good.
Yes.
And so that division started that way. And so that was kind of a reorganization, right? And then, in the 50s going into the 60s, narcotics started getting big, right? It's after World War II. So they put a Ranger captain in charge of that. I believe it was Captain Burke. And I could be wrong on some of these names, but because I'm just using my memory.
Was that G.W. Burke?
G.W. Burke. Mm-hmm. And he was one of the guys that was in the shootout with Carrasco in, 1972, 73 at TDCJ. So he started the narcotics unit, right? And same thing with the motor vehicle theft unit. Same thing with aircraft. The first aircraft that DPS had was a Ranger.
Yes.
So the lab was started under the Ranger division, because they're the first ones that needed forensics of some kind, right? So I say all that to say that the department has gone through reorganizations. In the 50s, it went through a reorganization again where it was the Highway Patrol Division and the CLE Division, where those services that we're talking about were established, you know, and you had the CLE Division then with its services in it, the Rangers being one of them, narcotics being another, criminal intelligence and motor vehicle theft. So that's the ones we knew
Yes.
as we were coming up. That's been organized again. So, and it needed to be. They need to, you need reorganization at certain times. If you don't, you stay the same. And I think that's what has allowed the people say, well, how come we still have Rangers? And it's because the Rangers have adapted to what they needed to do in 1823 to what they needed to do in 2023 and now 2025. It's not the same service. You know, we weren't the same Rangers that were there 20 years before us, and we're not the Rangers, the guys that are here now 20 years. The stuff they're doing, I look at, I said, man, I don't even know if I'd be good enough to be a Ranger.
Yeah, they're just getting smarter every year.
You know, and the technology that they have and the resources, assets,
Yeah.
you know, it's just unbelievable. But when I made chief, we were going through one of those reorganizations, and we were looking at. That's when I made chief right before Steve McCraw came into the department. But Steve, who was the right guy at the right time to be the director, you know, he had the right credentials. You know, he had been a Texas Highway Patrolman. Because I don't care. You know, we've known a couple of guys that got promoted. I know you're thinking of the name. I'm not going to say it, but we know people that came into the department. They were never troopers, and they then promoted in CLE or other places, and they were never treated or looked up to as the guys that started like we did at the academy.
Yes.
And then you work your way up from there to be who you're going to be, right? Well, Steve was that way. He went through the academy, was a Texas Highway Patrolman up in the Panhandle. He was a narcotics agent, I think, out of Amarillo, and then he went to the FBI. So he had something we didn't have. And then at the FBI, he promoted all the way up to assistant director at the FBI. So he had some knowledge, and the department needed that kind of a change agent to kind of get things moving forward. So during that time is when I made chief, and we were looking at. You were talking about the crisis negotiation team.
Yeah.
But that was one of the things that was in our department. It was like peppered across the department. We had this unit over here, we had that unit over there. So at the time, you know, we tried to centralize things, and Governor Perry was big on this, right? Like pushing us to do something, and pushing Steve to be the director and to get the department up and where it needed to be going into now 2008, 2010 to where we are now, you know, and not where we were. Think about how things have changed just going to the airport after 2001.
Big.
Yeah.
Lots of changes.
Lots of changes, right? So we started looking at things, and I'm going to go, you're going to later on talk to Hank Whitman, right?
Yes.
So Hank Whitman, who's the chief that followed me, had a lot to do with this, and his background's from the Marine Corps and military and all that. So I was more of a steer on things, and having people, you're in charge of this to do this, and you're in charge of this to do this.
Well, let me ask you, is the crisis negotiation unit, is it something that is, for lack of a better term, volunteer within the DPS, or was it a law or a state mandate that we as the state police have a crisis negotiation unit?
Well, we didn't. I can't tell you what the law is today, but at the time, it wasn't mandated in the government code or anything like that, but it was mandated by police best practices.
I see.
So if you want to be at the top of something and that you can respond to things, and so when I came in, you know, it's not been that long ago, but we didn't have a full-time SWAT team.
No.
You know, we had a part-time SWAT team, and we had, you know, a ranger or troopers, or, you know, you would try out for SWAT.
Right.
And you would have your gear in the trunk. And if something happened somewhere, hey, everybody would go there, right? But it wasn't a professional SWAT team.
And it's inefficient. It's inefficient because these guys would be out on patrol or out on an investigation and get that call, right, and then they would have to stop what they're doing, leave it alone, and then respond. A lot of times they'd have to go to Austin and they might be 1 or 2 counties away, and then get on a helicopter and go to where the trouble was.
Right. So during that, when we looked at that, and there was lots of stuff we did, but the border security, the Ranger recon units, and all that. So when we were looking at that, during that time, we had some guys, even back then, I would say 70% of the Rangers had a military background, and so we had guys like Bob Bullock, Hank Whitman, Jeff Robertson, people like that their background was they came from the military into the DPS, into being troopers, into CLE, into being the Rangers. So that's the guys I put in charge of that. And through that reorganization and working with the director's office, SWAT was taken from where it was in the Highway Patrol and put in under the Ranger Division, where it remains today. And, we sent captains like Whitman and others to train at Quantico, to train with Delta Force, to put together a professional SWAT team. And part of that, having a professional SWAT team, was that you train every day. If you're not working, you're training. It's not a part-time job. It's a full-time job. So I say all that to say that on the crisis negotiation team, kind of came with that when we were doing all that.
Okay.
Right? Now, we've always had in the Rangers, and in people we've always had guys that could BS somebody, and I say BS, they can talk to people, and some people that can't, that they can come across and make somebody feel comfortable. I mean, that goes all the way back. You and I were talking about Captain Crowder, Bill Crowder.
I was just going to ask you, this concept to the Texas Rangers is not new.
No, and I think
we've been negotiating with criminals who are barricaded or hostage takers, but we've been doing that for
so one of those
decades.
One of the stories you hear from way back when you were a young Ranger is like Bill Crowder, and I think it's Bill, but Captain Crowder.
Bob
Crowder.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Bob Crowder. That went to Russ State Hospital. They had they had taken over the state hospital. This is the mentally insane part of it back then. And he talked them out. And that was a big story back then, right? Everybody knows about, or we do, Barry Caver,
Yes.
working out in West Texas, and, knowing how that deal came out much differently than what we had here in Waco, where we're sitting today. When you and I were young, you were a young Ranger then,
I was,
1993.
Yes. I was there.
So the two came out much differently, and I really think that was raw talent on part of those negotiators. In Waco, we didn't handle it, another agency did.
Yes.
And it turned out way different than the one in West Texas in the Davis Mountains that Barry Caver handled. And I think that was partly because of the individuals that were involved on both sides.
Yes.
And that one of the things you learn in studying and becoming prepared for crisis negotiation is know who you're talking to, right? So while I give all the credit in the world to Barry Caver for what he did, he wasn't dealing with a religious fanatic. He was dealing with guys that didn't want to pay taxes, and didn't want to be part of government as we know it, or, a posse comitatus movement, right?
Right.
So sometimes, or always, religious zealots are much harder to deal with than a political zealot, because the religious zealot is prepared to die, and the other guy's like, I'm not, I don't know that I'm going.
I'm not buying all the way in on this.
I'm not, I don't know that my cause is the same as that. So those are the things you learn in putting these things together, is like, know your target, right? Know who you're talking to.
Right.
And, when we were young policemen, they were called hostage negotiations.
Yes.
Right. And that comes from the 70s during the Olympics,
Yes.
they hold hostages. We had, back in the 70s and 80s, we had people that were taking airplanes and wanting to go to Cuba or
Hijackers,
here,
yeah.
right? But when the FBI started, this all kind of started with the FBI, the units as we know them, right? And then moved to policemen. So when everybody started looking at it, when it started getting studied as what really was happening is a hostage negotiation is very transactional. It's like, I want this, you get this, right?
Yes.
So in police work, that's very rare. That's very rare. You know, if people have hostages, there's two ways they have it. It's either a mental crisis of some type, right? Or they just got caught during something and there happened to be people there that they could hold until they get out of there, right?
Right.
It's not really like the Houston PD or Dallas PD or the Rangers are not going to get a call and saying, hey, I've taken these hostages and I want an airplane to wherever.
Those days are over.
Those days are over, and it just didn't really happen.
Right.
But what we do find in studying it is, and this happens way more than people think, and that's why you have crisis negotiators, is what happens a lot in police business is that someone in some type of mental crisis, right,
Yeah.
will take himself or the people that he purports to love into his custody. They're not hostages because he's not asking for anything. It's not transactional. You know, it's not a transaction for him. It's she's leaving me and that's the end of my world. I'm going to kill her and my kids.
Right.
Or, and that's just one example, but it's that kind of crisis that the person's having.
Tony, what kind of training do we give our Rangers for this kind of the new wave of what we used to call hostage taking? It's this mental crisis. What kind of training do we give them?
Well, I mean, and it's mandatory through TCOL, but it's just expanded upon in this training for those people that become certified, that become, hey, this is our crisis negotiator, this person, right?
Sure.
Which I think you'd have made a good one at, because you're good with talking with people. But it's about, it's about the training helps for the person who's certified to, first of all, identify what he's got. What do we have here? What is going on with this person, and why are we here? Like, you got to know why you're there, right? And then de-escalation, and learning those de-escalation skills are really important just day to day to the highway patrolman or any policeman, right? Because a lot of times, if you can de-escalate a situation and get it to where,
you don't
it
have
just
to use
goes away.
force. You don't have to
put
use
a hand on anybody.
That's
They don't
right.
put a hand on you. You don't have to pull a weapon. It gets over before, just by de-escalating it.
Sure.
That person, you don't know where that person's life is. I've seen a lot of policemen where things went bad for them. And I'm not talking about they got hurt or killed. I'm talking about where something escalated, just because the policeman won't de-escalate and wants to be, I'm right, you're wrong.
They trigger something that they didn't have to.
Exactly. So if you got the person in the car, and you have a right to do it, but if you got the person in the car that says, I'm not getting out of the car, or I'm not signing that ticket, there's two ways you can go down that road, and I'm not saying I'm never done it, but I'm saying one way is to say, okay, don't sign it. There'll be a warrant out for you, and you're going to get somewhere and get stopped, and you're going to get picked up, and you're going to get picked up in front of your family, or they're going to pick you up at work instead of signing this and being able to go down the road, Instead of that, it turns into, and I've seen it, we're breaking windows with a flashlight and pulling people out of cars, over something that just didn't need to escalate like that.
I think you're talking about me now.
So,
I wish I had some of those skills back in the day, because I'm afraid a lot of my times I did it the hard way.
Yeah, you did it the hard way, and I did too, right? And I don't know that we were taught any other way to do it. We were the Texas Highway Patrol, and you're coming with us,
Yeah.
right? So I'm saying when you ask about the training, that's some of that training is to, if you, if you treat if all it's like your kids, all they know is what you teach them, right, from the beginning,
Yes.
right? So if you treat a young man from the time he starts wearing blue jeans, that hey, if you have tails on your shirt, you tuck it in, and if you tuck it in, you wear a belt. If that's all that kid knows from the time, then that's what they know, right? So same thing in training new officers. So I think DPS now, their training is so much elevated from when you and I were there,
Yes.
you know, and you came out looking like a POW, you know, from patrol school, and it was just really about, the PT was more about getting people to quit
Yes.
than to stay. They're really getting training now, you know. I mean, they get water rescue training, they get things we wouldn't even thought about getting trained in. And so if you start that from the day you get there with them, and then, you know, that these Rangers get that. Our job when you go somewhere is not to win. It's not to win. You know, when that guy's inside his home holding his wife or kids or somebody else, however it falls, somebody that gets in an argument or has a breakdown at a Walmart, it doesn't matter. Our job's not there to win. You know, it's not there our job's not even there to get that guy in jail. Our job is to make sure everybody gets out safe, including that person, right? And there are times you'll need to kill that person, you know. But what the crisis negotiation is supposed to do is what they're trained to do, and I can't go into the specifics of their training anymore. Go with that, you know, in another interview with somebody that's doing it now, because I don't want to talk about something we were doing 10 years ago as opposed to what they're doing now. But the goal for that is first find out what that person, why are they in there, you know, and then try to talk to them in a way that doesn't ignite something bigger. You know, there may be a situation where mom shows up, you know, and says, I want to talk to him, you know, let me talk to him, I can get him out of there. Well, there may be the situation where he hates his mom.
Yeah.
And you don't know he hates his mom.
That's right.
And as soon as she gets on the phone and says, hey, you stupid, you know, let your kids go, that's going to trigger him and elevate what you're doing, right? And there may be some other cases where that guy is like, hey, I want to talk to my mom, or I want to talk to my dad, or I want to talk to my uncle, right? Okay, so now you need to figure out why. Does he want to tell them goodbye? You know, and he's fixing to kill himself and everybody in there, or does he need, you know? So that's when you start the crisis negotiation of, okay, we might be able to make that happen, you know, and then it does become transactional in that now he said he wants something, right? So you got to get something for that, and you got to talk with him about that can happen, but what are we going to get for it?
You said something a few seconds ago about 10. You know, I don't want to talk about today's training because this was 10 years ago. That's a big part of this, the evolution of what we're doing here. SWAT teams today are not the same as SWAT teams of the 1960s when they first started, and probably in California. It's just like with the Texas Rangers, we are successful because we have evolved with the times. You know, we're not riding horses and protecting settlers from hostiles. Right. What we're doing today is the most sophisticated criminal investigation techniques, and you know, and just like this crisis negotiation, you know, that there is, and and we get trained by the best. We
were the best at our time.
That's right.
You know, during our time.
That's right.
And I think it remains that way. I think the Rangers are still being sent in. You know, you'll see it all the time. You know, I just saw it in the paper yesterday. I don't mention investigations, but the governor, I think the AG's office just called for a special investigation, and the Rangers were assigned to, hey, go investigate this, right? Same thing with manhunt, same thing with high level homicides. You know, it depends where you're stationed. But at the time, you know, I knew when I was in Seguin, Texas, and I was a working ranger, I was the best trained officer in those counties. you know, and I got called to every homicide. Didn't matter if it was the middle of the night. Didn't matter if it was a bar fight, you know, because I would go and help write the search warrants, help do all that. That's not the same job that a ranger does in Houston. You know, Houston has a crime scene unit. So they fall into helping the Houston Police Department there with maybe, and now we got a chief of police there that was a ranger.
Yes, Noe Diaz.
Noe Diaz. So who we worked with.
Yes.
But with the need of the rangers are different in different areas, and we adapt to that. The rangers always adapt to that. So in Houston, it may be, hey, we need rangers on the public corruption unit, you know, and you assign rangers to the public corruption unit, and they work with the FBI and the Harris County DA's office. We need rangers on the fugitive task force, you know, which I know you did,
yes.
you know, with the U.S. Marshal's office. So it just kind of caters to where you're at, you know. So all of the rangers need training in that, because you may be the first person to show up to, you know. I think Uvalde taught us, you know, that you don't know what's going to happen and where it's going to happen.
That's right.
So personnel need to be trained to respond first. You don't always have time, you know, for a SWAT team out of Austin, even though they're
isn't that the truth?
You know, you just don't have time, and you got to act. So that's what I don't think there's ever been a time, and we've talked about that. I don't want to run it into the ground. The Rangers that I know right now, from the majors down, you know, they are sharper and better trained and at more things, you know, than ever. And this was part of that, moving that way, you know.
Yes, they carry around more gear and more technology than we even could imagine back in our day.
Yeah. I mean, I graduated from Highway Patrol School with a wheel gun and loops on my Sam Brown, you know.
I think we had 6 rounds in our weapon and 12 rounds in our
rounds
loops.
on your belt, you know. And I'm talking about loops, you know.
Yeah.
Where you got to pull each bullet out, you know. And we thought it was really high tech. The school after mine, they sent speed loaders out to the field.
Oh, wasn't that nice?
And I thought, man, we have, you know, that was high tech.
I remember late one night in Bell County that there was a chase coming down the interstate from Hillsboro, which, you know, 55, 60 miles away. And I was all by myself, set up on this, kind of where there's a choke point on the interstate in Temple. And as he came past me, I followed in behind him, and it came to the point where, someone's going to have to start shooting tires. And I shot all 6 of my rounds out of my wheel gun. I reloaded with my speed loaders as I'm driving down the road, and I think I shot 18 rounds. And when we finally rammed him and got him stopped in South Temple, I remember I jumped out with everybody else, and my gun was empty.
You didn't
I didn't have any more bullets.
Yeah.
So that's just that's a sign of the times.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, and it's sad that if you think about it, I should have said why I'm saying this is sad. You know, we didn't have, you know, semi-automatic rifles when we, and it felt like a different time. You know,
It was.
The things that go on now that you may be responding to just weren't things that we routinely responded to. I mean,
I tell people back in those days we had the best equipment that low bid could buy.
yeah, exactly.
That's
You know,
the way it was.
we had a pistol, we had a shotgun.
Yeah.
You know, and which is useless against, 223 or 308 ammo coming at you.
Yeah.
You might as well take that pistol and just hide behind it, you know, because you just can't, unless people don't understand when they say, well, why didn't they do this or do that? If somebody's shooting at you with a semi-automatic rifle or fully automatic rifle, you literally can't, it literally is like if you had a cup of water and they're coming at you with a fire hose. You can't even, you know, and there are times that you can put somebody down. You know, you come up behind them, pop them in the back of the head, pop them in the back, take them down. You can do that, and you have to, and that takes some guts to do that, right? But on a full out, you and me facing each other, if I had either one of these weapons and you've got a 308 or 223 in your hand, I can't even. It's not even a fight. It's not like on TV. It's not like, you know. I don't know how many people I know that carry a pistol with them everywhere they go, you know, and I'm talking about civilians, you know, and they got a 380 on them or a 30, whatever they're carrying on them, right? And as soon as something happens, I would have done this or I would have done that. I mean, I'm like, I don't know that you do shit. I don't know what the hell you would do, you know, because it's not like shooting at a target.
Yeah.
You know, you can shoot at a target all day long and be Rambo, but when something's shooting back at you and the stuff behind you is splintering and glass is breaking, and then you can hit that X on that target, come talk to me.
Exactly.
You know, because it's not the same.
Well, Tony, we had talked a little bit earlier about an old Ranger captain, Bob Crowder, and that he had gone down to Rusk and successfully negotiated. Can you think of any other examples of that over the years, and maybe in your career where you actually had to talk to someone who may be in a car with a gun or anything like that?
Yeah, I remember one night, and again, we go back to how people are trained now and how people were trained in '94, you know, which is now 30 years ago. Think about that.
Hard to believe.
But we had, I think it's happened, I think, first of all, and I'm going to give you an example, but if you think about it, every cop you know has done it. Every policeman has got a guy in handcuffs and into a car that didn't want to go, that was going to fight, that was, you know, going to kick in windows, that's going to kick out the windows of the car and all that. So, and some of those were handled by force, right? But some of those, and I bet you money, in your career, you talk somebody into jail that didn't want to go.
Sure.
Okay? And think about that. You're talking somebody into, right now I'm good, I'm free, and you're going to, and I don't want to go to jail. I'm not talking about the person who volunteers, I'm talking about the guy that's going to fight, or the woman that's going to fight. But that you were able to say, you talked to them, you got them in handcuffs, you got them in the car, and you got them to jail, and you went to get a cup of coffee afterwards with the other highway patrolman, and you didn't get hit, and that guy didn't get hit. Okay, so that's a form of crisis negotiation, right? That guy's in a crisis. He's on the side of the road. He was going home, coming from work, going to work, whatever it is. He got a warrant. He's drunk, whatever it is.
Had a bad day.
He's having a crisis at that moment that you're going to put him in jail, right? So being able to do that is just a natural deal. I remember one night in Seguin, and think about this. So it's after hours. Sheriff's Department calls on the radio that there's a domestic disturbance out off of Alamos Loop, I think, which is between like Seguin and going towards Wilson County. So you hear it on the radio, you know, and domestic violence call blah, blah, at this location, right? And then you hear another deputy say, "Hey, I know that house. They've had problems with her." But they're just chattering, right? And I was coming back from San Antonio, and this is already 8 or 9 o'clock at night, but I was coming from working a case in San Antonio back to Seguin. So I'm hearing on my radio what's going on. And so the first deputy says, "I'm here." Second deputy says, I'm right behind you, right? So as the first deputy gets here, the next thing you hear, "Hey, I just got shot, you know, just got my window blown out," you know, because the guy shot his window out. Or shot over the car. I don't think he blew his window out. So the sheriff, we had a sheriff at that time.
The elected sheriff.
The elected sheriff. The high sheriff.
High sheriff.
The high sheriff.
Yeah.
He's an old German man, and when I say old, he's my age now. Maybe a little bit older, but he was one of those.
That's not right.
Had been the sheriff for 30 years, you know, so maybe elected as sheriff first, or had gone to work for the sheriff's office maybe in the 50s, 60s, and is now the high sheriff, right? And he used to wear an LBJ. People don't like the small.
What's that
2
called?
3/4 inch hat.
What's that called?
An LBJ.
Open road, is that
An
right?
open road.
Yeah.
An open road. So he used to always wear an open road, straw one during the summer, silver belly during fall, a white shirt, pearl snap shirt, cowboy shirt, badge hanging out of his pocket on a deal, boots, khakis, no weapon. And he kept his weapon underneath the front seat of his car.
A different time.
And that's how he patrolled Seguin, right? I mean, and he had patrolmen and all that, but that was just his. And if he needed his weapon, he'd pull it out from the seat and stick it in his pants.
Right.
You know, but Harbeth, I think was his name. Do you remember him? Melvin Harbeth, I think that was his name. But he calls, I'm coming too. I know that old boy. He's a rancher. I know that guy that's out there. So he and I get there about the same time. And this is out in the Mesquite, Caliche Road. And the guy is sitting in his Caliche driveway back away from the road over a gate, like a cattle gate, in one of those fold out, like everybody's had them, mesh lawn chairs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So he's sitting there, and there's a bottle sitting there, and he's got if I remember right, a shotgun across his lap. And his wife and 2 kids are in the house, and we know that because she's called the sheriff's. She's the one that called the sheriff's department and say, "Hey, my husband, he's intoxicated and he's going to kill us," and all. So they had an argument in there. So we pull up, and the sheriff says, "Hey, I know this guy. He's not a bad guy. He got a bad drinking problem." And he looks at me because I was a young ranger, and he goes, let's go up there and talk to him. Not on a speaker.
Yeah, face to face.
Because it's dark, and he's about 100 yards in, maybe 50 yards in. Let's go in there and talk to him. I said, yes, sir. Let's go in there and talk to him. And he said, but leave your gun here. Oh. That's going to, So I'm like, I go to my car, I'm thinking, but I always carry 2 pistols, So I had that little 30, I had a Model 36, not the one you saw now, but
much like it.
But like it, a blue one. So I stuck it down in my pants. I thought, he's going to shoot the sheriff first.
Sure.
If something happens. And I'll be able to I'll kill him.
Yeah.
Before he gets me, because he's got, So we walk over to him, and he's got the shotgun laid across him. And we get there, and these are things you learn or that just come from experience or just from inside you somewhere, right? And that's kind of what the training is about. And
right.
And the training evolves from things like what I'm talking about. So what do you think the first thing you need to do is?
With this old boy you're talking to?
Mm-hmm.
He's sitting down, right? Get down on his level.
Yeah, there you go, yeah.
You're going to look at him eye to eye, all right? And anybody that teaches you how to talk to children without scaring them.
Yeah.
Is say, hey, get on one knee and talk to that kid right here. Right. Now, let me say this before we all get a bunch of emails or texts or anything, that what we're doing right now is not the right way to do it. I'm telling you how you learn to deal with people and how you do things at different phases in your career.
This was the 1990s version.
Yes. So we went over there and we got down, and the sheriff started talking to him. Hey, what's going on? And I don't remember the guy's name. And the guy told him something happened between he and his wife, and it I don't remember what it involved, but it was something he was really upset about. And she wanted to leave, and he wasn't going to let her leave, and he wouldn't hurt him, but he wasn't coming out, and they weren't coming out, And so we're talking to him, and I can see her inside the house, and she got one baby in one arm, and another one I couldn't see. When you talk about escalating things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the sheriff looks at him and says, okay, we can't fix this for you tonight. He said, but if we let you stay here, and the sheriff told him, you're going to get charged with this. You shot a round over the deputy's head,
Oh, yeah.
That's a discharge of a firearm, within 500 feet of a residence or a public road. You committed this thing, but it's not that serious right now. He goes, it could get serious real quick. He said, but why don't you let this ranger go up there and check on your wife and let him get her a hotel room tonight. That way we know she's okay. And you can stay here. And tomorrow you call me and you come up to the jail and you turn yourself in, and, I'm the sheriff. I'll give you a personal recognizance bond. I know who you are. and then you can move on from it that way. And it took a lot longer than what I'm talking about
Yeah,
right now.
sure.
But that was the gist of what happened, right? And I walked up to the house, and he stayed there talking with the guy, and I walked her out of there and got her in the car, and the sheriff then backed out, and we left him there. Now, was that a great idea? I don't know. If he'd have killed himself that night, once we left, we'd have probably been talked bad about. If we'd have had to get in the shootout because I brought them out, and once he saw him, he did something, and we're standing there, not armed like we should be. But all that doesn't matter once it turns out okay, right? Mm-hmm. And so you learn from those things that anybody could critique that deal and tell you everything we did wrong. But I know some other places that I've been at where that same situation would have. I know that guy's still alive now, and I know, or at least after that happened,
Yeah.
and that I would see him at the Guadalupe County Co-op because he was a farmer rancher, and I'd see him at the co-op, and he was more embarrassed than anything, like, "Hey, Ranger, how you doing?" And I know that his wife is still alive after that happened, and I know the kids were still alive after that happened, so you could have had a sniper up there that said, "Hey, man, we get a clear shot, kill him." Right?
I was just thinking that very same thing.
And if that would have happened in some other venue,
Oh,
that
yeah.
guy would be dead.
In Houston, that happened.
Yeah, it would be yeah, maybe Houston, maybe another county over, but it would happen where if you take the position of I'm going to win,
Right.
you're coming with me now, but once we got that wife and kids out of there, and got ourselves out of there, he's free to do what he wants, and there's all kinds of scenarios where that's not okay. If you could have smarter people than me look at that and say, yeah, but he could have gotten his truck and done this okay, but that didn't happen, so you take those type of situations and learn from them, put them into the training that you do. A lot of that training is just like, this happened and went wrong. There's nothing better than training on when something goes south, and
Right.
pick and then look at that, do that. What do they call it? It's a reverse autopsy, but just like you do of a victim, right? Where you look at it, we call them action reviews, right? But
Sure.
you take that and say what went right and what went wrong, what we could have done better, what caused us for this to happen that way. And I think that analytical approach to it is what the Rangers have done now. Have taken all those things that worked out
Mm-hmm.
right. Like I'm sure they've looked at, hey, what did Barry Caver do right at that deal
Yeah.
out there in West Texas?
Exactly.
And hell, we ended up killing one out there though.
Yes, we did.
But he refused to comply with what everybody that was with him did, and started shooting at Rangers. Right, it was a one-off.
He made his own decision that day, and
That's right. So even in that deal, someone died, and it wasn't us.
That's right.
So you can look at that case and study it. And I don't think Barry was just great at it. Barry is a great negotiator, and came easy for him
Yeah.
to be in that position, because you can't teach it all. You can't teach somebody to be a great interviewer. You can teach someone how to be a better interviewer. And so if you were born a good interviewer, you will be taught to be a great interviewer. And you can teach somebody that's not so good at it to be an okay interviewer. But some of it's natural talent.
right.
you know.
Well, this has just been fascinating today, Chief, and I really appreciate you coming on for this episode of the Cinco Peso podcast.
Thank you, Matt. It's good
This
seeing you.
has been very informative, and I want to remind our viewers out there to always like and subscribe and comment on our podcast, and we will be here hopefully next week, and we'll talk with, or in the very near future, and talk with former Chief Hank Whitman, because I believe Chief Whitman was given the task of actually assembling and facilitating the crisis negotiation unit.
Again, as part of the SWAT team and the Special Operations team and all that, yeah.
And folks, be sure and join us next week for the Cinco Peso podcast. Stop by and saddle up and join us, and we will see you then.